Hey, it's Walt from Big Guys Can. I created this YouTube channel to inspire and empower big guys to get out into nature and enjoy themselves. I'm going to go over my story of how I went from barely able to ride my bike 3 miles a day to bike packing the Great Allegheny Passage. I'm going to break this story up into about 3 parts: how I prepared for the ride and how I got to that point, and my first day and second day. So let's get started. So actually this video should start off by saying this was almost a hiking video. What I mean by that was I hadn't planned on doing a backpacking trip this summer. I had planned on doing, a bike packing trip this summer. I planned on doing backpacking trips. And my goal for the summer was to hike the Laurel Highlands hiking trail from Ohio State Park to Johnstown, Pennsylvania. It's a 70-mile trail, and I planned on doing section hikes of it and completing the whole Laurel Highlands Trail this summer. That was my goal. I started buying equipment to do a backpacking trip. So I bought a new backpack, a new isobutane stove, BRS 3000 stove, Coleman camping kit, like a steel pot with stuff in it to boil my water in, and some other stuff that Sawyer squeeze water filtration system. So I'm getting ready to do these backpacking trips. Fast forward to doing some hikes, and my back just not cooperating with me. So my lower back on the right side of my body, my lower back starts cramping up if I get, I don't know, five miles into the day, and it keeps cramping up. And I've started seeing some doctors, and we're working on this, and we're still working towards a solution. But one of the things they told me was, you should exercise more and get out and do some stuff. Maybe build your core muscles up and help you out a little bit. So I decided I'm going to start riding my bike to get in better shape so I can go hiking. That was the whole goal. And that's where this whole thing started. So we have a riding trail. It's called the Jim Mayer Trail. It is out and back. It's 6.2 miles total. And I didn't know if I could ride the 6 miles, so I started halfway between the start and finish. I started right in the middle, and I rode 1.5 miles out to the end, and then 1.5 miles back to the middle, which was 3 miles, and I thought I was going to die. My legs were burning. I was breathing heavy. My heart was racing. I'm like, man, I'm out of shape. I'm in bad shape. I used to run that same 3 miles every morning before work when I was training for my fight, and I was like, man, I used to run this, let alone ride a bike on it. It should be a lot easier. But so that was my first day, and I got, loaded my bike back in a truck, and I went home, and I'm like, still felt accomplished because I got off my couch and rode 3 miles. Felt discouraged because I rode 3 miles and I felt like I was gonna pass out. Next day, I do the same thing. I feel a little bit better. I'm like, well, I'm not gonna die. I'm okay. Third day, do the same ride. The third day, I load my bike up in a truck and I start driving home feeling kind of like I left some miles out there. What I mean by that is I felt like I could have went further, and I wasn't tired, and I didn't feel as accomplished the third day. So I said the fourth day, I'm going to try to ride the whole 6.2 miles. And that's what I did. So the fourth day I ride out and ride back, and I'm like, well, it's not that bad. It wasn't, it was double what I've been doing, but it didn't seem that bad to me. So for the next couple of days, I just kept riding this 6.2 miles out and back till one day I came back towards my truck, and I rode right past my truck, and I'm like, I'm going to ride the other direction a little bit. So I rode 2 miles in the other direction, then 2 miles back. So now I rode 10 miles, and I felt so accomplished that day. I could just remember it and just sit in my truck looking like, man, I'm badass. I rode 10 miles a day on my bike, and it just felt good inside. And the more I rode, the more I wanted to ride. So everything was based on like getting up in the morning and riding my bike. I'm going to do this. I'm going to get healthy. I'm going to hike this, backpack these trails. I'm going to complete it this summer. I get up off my bike, I ride 10 miles home. We're walking through Walmart, and my wife's like, "What's the matter with you?" I'm like, "My back's cramping," and she's mad at me. In her defense, it just seems like a ridiculous thing where I could ride 10 miles on a bike, but not stand in Walmart without being in pain in my back. And I agreed with her. So I kept seeing my doctors, and we're trying to figure this out, and still no answers. But I realize on my bike, my back doesn't hurt. No matter how far I ride, my back doesn't hurt. So that's a great thing. So this is where my backpacking trip turns into a bike packing trip. I figured, well, I am buying all this equipment for my backpacking trip. Maybe I can take a trip. And I came across, how it started was I came across a video on YouTube produced by REI out of Pittsburgh. And it was 4 friends who had never bike packed before. They sent them on a trip from Cumberland to Pittsburgh. So they put them on a train, sent them to Cumberland. Then they rode their bikes back from Cumberland to Pittsburgh. Now it took them a few days, and it was basically an advertisement for REI in the Laurel Highlands area. It was like a promotional video for Laurel Highlands because it showed, what you can do, the whitewater rafting, the bed and breakfasts you can stay at. It was kind of a cool little video series, kind of set up like a 90s sitcom entrance to the videos, but it got me thinking that, man, I can make this trip. I can make that trip from Cumberland to Pittsburgh, so I could kind of feel accomplished. I can use my camping equipment that I bought for the hike, and I have a goal to work towards. As my wife's sitting there, she starts laughing. She says, "When are you going?" And I said, July 12th. July 12th I'm going, and that's the weekend I'm going, and so I set it up. My stepdaughter was with her dad on vacation that week, so I knew that was the perfect week that I'd be free to go and not screw up family time. So I had it set. Now, July 12th was only a month and a half away, 2 months away, and at this point, everybody's laughing at me, saying, "That's crazy. It's 150 miles. You're going to do this by yourself?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm going to do it by myself." And they're like, "You're going to camp?" And I said, "Yes, I'm going to camp. And you're going to cook your food you're going to boil water and dump it in a bag to cook your food?" "Yes, I'm going to do all this." So this is all stuff that I'm going through in my head and asking for people. My wife's biggest concern was, is your bike going to break down along the way? And I said, I don't think so, but if it does, I have spare tire. I have spare tubes. I have changers so I can change them. I have links for my chains. I've been watching videos how to fix this stuff. As long as there's no big catastrophe, I know how to fix my brakes. So basically, all the components of a bike, for the most part, I can fix out on the trail. Anything that would majorly happen. Well, as I'm looking at all this stuff, I come across a website. It's our local bike shop, and it is Fat Jimmy's Bikes out of Johnstown, Pennsylvania. They have a store in Johnstown and Bedford. And I see this bike on there, and it just catches my eye that I'm like, man, it was a Cannondale Adventure 2, and it was a step over, like, men's bike, and I was like, man, that price is really, really low. And so I called, and ended up, the owner of the store answered, and I said, "I'm looking at this bike on your website, this Cannondale Adventure 2, and the price just doesn't seem right." And he's kind of chuckled. He said, "Yeah," he said, "that is a leftover bike. It's a few years old. It's, brand new, but no one wants it because it's a really big bike. The frame's really big, and it's a leftover COVID bike. I just want rid of it." So without even seeing this bike in person, I just bought it online, and I told him, I said, "I can't be here. I can't come today because I had to go to work, but I can come down on Monday." So I bought it on Saturday before I went to work, and I picked it up on Monday. When I got there, the guy said, "I want you to ride around the parking lot." It actually was at their Bedford location. That's why I couldn't pick it up on Saturday. So it was a 40-minute ride into Bedford, Pennsylvania, to pick this bike up. That's why I couldn't go. I went Monday, picked my bike up, and he said, I want you to ride it around the parking lot to make sure it's fits you, because it's a big frame. And so I rode around the parking lot thinking, I'm just updating my bike. I wasn't really thinking it was an upgrade. It was more of an update, because my bike's older, and the Specialized bike, it's a Specialized hybrid, and it was a great bike, but it was just a medium large frame, and I wanted a extra large frame. So I'm going to update my bike to this new Cannondale, which was an extra large frame. And when I start riding this bike around a parking lot, the seat was pretty high, and I'm like, man, that's kind of high, but I think I can work with it. And I ended up taking the reflector off the back post of the seat, and it dropped it down a ½ inch, and then it was perfect for me. So, but I went from thinking I was updating my bike to upgrading my bike, because the first time I rode that thing on the road, man, I was getting 3 miles per hour faster. It just felt good. The bike fit me better, and I didn't feel like I was squished up on it. So it just felt better. So the bike fitting, and I'm feeling more confident with this bike to ride the 150 miles from Cumberland to Pittsburgh. And the reason I started riding more and planning this trip is I started wondering, is this bike going to handle all this weight? And I know I was a big guy, but I had to put 30 to 40 pounds of stuff on my bike too. So what I did was I bought my rack for the back of my bike, and I bought some bags. And I started putting all the stuff that I thought that I was going to take with me on this bike packing trip. I started riding every day with it. So when you saw me riding through Ferndale or riding on the Jim Mayer Trail, I was packed full of gear, just because I wanted to train with my gear to make it easier to perform that when I was actually doing the ride. And that's one of the keys to doing these kind of things. You have to train with what you're using and the weight that I was carrying. So by the time I was going to ride this trail, I had been training for weeks with full weight, except for my CPAP machine and my clothes. So my CPAP machine was the other obstacle that I had, and that started off when I was planning a hiking trip. How am I going to stay in the woods out in the middle of nowhere needing a CPAP machine? Well, I started watching videos, and everybody that I saw was using this little tiny travel CPAP machine and battery pack. And this machine alone is $900, and the battery is another $300 or $400. And so I called my insurance company. I said, hey, I've been traveling a lot for work, which I was traveling a lot for work, and I'm tired of carrying my big CPAP machine through the airport. Will you guys cover a small travel machine? And they said, absolutely not. No, they don't cover it. So people who have a CPAP machine and have to travel have to suffer like I do. Your insurance company is not going to pay for a travel size CPAP machine, even though you can use it every night just like a normal CPAP machine. And price wise, they're basically comparable to a normal CPAP machine price, which I was due for an update anyhow. I was due for a new machine because my machine's 5-10 years old. So my insurance would cover a new machine, they just won't cover this travel machine. So as I'm watching videos on YouTube trying to figure this all out, I come across a video from a guy, and I'm not even sure of his name, but he was taking a sailing trip, taking a sailboat, and he had a CPAP machine, and he was worried about the generators not working on the sailboat and the battery backups on the sailboat. They were sailing around somewhere. It was a long trip though, and he had a CPAP machine. And I look, and the CPAP machine happened to be the same exact one that I have. It's a Respironics System 1, one of the recalled machines that everybody's worked up over, but I have this thing, and it's about 8 by 8 by 6, maybe, a small cube. I don't use the dehumidifier part of it, but I have a Respironics System 1, and he said this is probably one of the best systems to use with a battery pack because it's a 12-volt system, and I didn't realize that. So there's a converter you plug into the wall normally to this thing, but it's a 12-volt system, whereas the travel one is not a 12-volt system, so it uses more battery life. So the system that I ended up having to begin with ended up being probably one of the best travel systems for camping and bike packing. So this guy has this thing, and he shows his battery pack. It's an AIM Tom 155 amp hour. It looks like a little portable radio type. I mean, little battery backup bank, but it looks like, you know, old school radio. And his lasted him 5 days, but his pressures were a lot lower than my pressures on his machine. So I buy this thing, and it was pretty cheap off Amazon. I think I got it for $89, something like that, this battery backup. And it was nice that, so I had it anyhow, because if the power goes out in my house, I don't have any kind of backup system for my CPAP machine. So now I have this backup battery that I can use if my power goes out, and I can still sleep. But now I'm gonna have it for my camping trips and my bike packing trips. So now I have my battery problem figured out. My CPAP's ready to go. So all I needed to do was add clothes, and I really didn't need a lot. I had a pair of shorts and underwear to wear when I was camping, and that was about it. Like, I had clothes when I was riding, clothes when I was camping. Then I had some other little essentials that I added on, but then, so basically I added a jacket, which was stupid for me to take. I added just a couple other things, another pair of socks. That's about it. So I have one tube, which was a 10-liter tube bags that, you know, I have one on each side. So one was full with clothes, the other was full with food. I had some food on the back. So now I have food, water, my CPAP machine, and the whole time I'm like figuring out how to do this stuff. My wife's saying, "Is your bike gonna make it?" And I'm like, "Sure, it's gonna make it. It's, you know, it's, if not, I have tools, I have stuff to replace things." I ended up riding the Ghost Town Trail and snapping a spoke. It was the first time that I questioned anything. I was about 12 miles up on the Ghost Town Trail going from Homer City to Dealtown, and I heard a spoke break. And if you never hear a spoke break, it's one of those sounds where you're like, huh, did I just run over a rock, or what happened? It's a real ting noise. Ting, you know, you hear a ting noise. You really don't feel it. But when the second one broke, I was like, oh, I heard that. That's definitely something I heard. And with wheel tensions, the more you ride on them, if it's not tensioned right and you break a spoke, you just keep breaking spokes until they're all gone, and you're in trouble. With one spoke broke, you can ride for a while. With two spokes broke, you can ride for a while. But I knew at that point I had to turn around and get back to the truck as soon as possible. So I made it back to the truck, and now I'm disappointed because I have this brand new bike that I broke some spokes on. And so I take it back to Fat Jimmy's where I bought it, and the guy goes, well, it just might not have been tensioned right, and so we'll get this all fixed up for you. So they fixed the spokes for me, and I said, what happens if I break spokes again? And he said, your next option is to do a touring wheel. So I was like, okay, you know, we'll check that down the road. So the next week comes, and I'm on the same exact trail that I broke the spokes on the week before, and I'm riding up the hill, and I heard tink, and another spoke. So at this point, it's me, 40 pounds of equipment, and my bike, once again, trying to make it back to the truck on the Ghost Town Trail, and broken spokes. By the time I get back there, I had 3 spokes broken, and I'm frustrated. And at this point, I'm like, this is only 13 miles into a trip, 26 if you know, round trip. How am I going to make it 150 with this? So I call Fat Jimmy's up, talk to the technician. I said, how much is it going to cost me to get this rear wheel changed out to a touring one? And so he tells me a price, and then it ended up being, I was like, yeah, order it. And I dropped my bike off there. He calls me and says, well, I have an issue. A slight issue with your bike. I have to change your rear cassette. So your rear cassette is the sprockets on the back of the bike. The sprockets on the back of the bike, they're all within, they're all rated by how many teeth are on it. So it's like 32 or to 11, like how many teeth per sprocket's on this thing. And it'll tell you, the bigger sprockets and smaller sprockets are for going up hills and on flats. But the problem was my bike wheel cassette, the cassette that was on my original factory wheel, wouldn't convert over to the new touring rear wheel. So I have a Velocity Cliffhanger touring rear wheel is what I got, but my cassette wouldn't go over because the splines on the axle were different. So there's a few sets of companies that make these cassettes, and some of them use like a bar going through, and some of them use a spool on. But basically the set that I had on my bike wouldn't fit on the new wheel. So I had to change that out. He said, climbing hills is going to be a little bit more difficult, but you're going to have a lot more speed on the flats. So for me, that was like, I'm okay climbing hills because I've been climbing hills religiously for the last months that's what I was working the hardest on, was